If the chairs agree, we may now start our meeting. And first of all, thank you good afternoon, everybody, and thank you very much for joining this roundtable Future Scenarios on EUROMED Agrifood, which is jointly co-organized by PRIMA and the Italian Secretariat of PRIMA with the Union for the Mediterranean. This meeting is inscribed within the 25th anniversary of Since the Barcelona process, and we thank very much the Swedish Development Cooperation for supporting this meeting. So without further ado, I would like to invite for the welcome Mr. Angelo Riccaboni, Chair of the Prima Foundation. Excellency, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I'm very pleased to greet everybody, and Prima Foundation is very, very happy to organize this webinar together with our friends from the Union for the Mediterranean. This is a concrete message and signal that we are working together. We want to work together for the benefit of the future of the Mediterranean. We know that there are major issues, major problems around, but only with partnerships we can tackle these challenges. And unfortunately, challenges coming out of the COVID are very important, and they regard also agri-food systems. And we will see the analysis that Omar Amawi will present in a few minutes, that there are major issues, and in order to tackle these issues, innovation is key, but also working together, because one of the issues which emerge is that our participants to the survey show that it's very important a broad concept of governance. That is really relevant, and I think also the recent farm to fork strategies goes in this direction. So Prima every year launches around 60-70 million calls on research and innovation agri-food systems, and this webinar is very important for us because we want to listen to what the experts say, and we want to know more about the future of the Mediterranean, because we want to prepare our annual work plans according which are the needs. So I think that is a very interesting moment for us to listen to experts to better know which will be the path for the future. Let me say that we are also very pleased of the success of this initiative. We have more 300 registered participants from 25 countries, which really are impressive numbers, and I think that is a key for us. The challenge in front of us is the one of building back better, the one of promoting a just transition, and we need to consider environmental aspects, but also social aspects. And then I think that this is the great job that we have to do together to promote a just transition, taking into consideration that nobody should be left behind, and our topics, agri-food systems, innovation agri-food system, are very important to do that. But also what is important is the inclusion of a private sector. So this is the reason why also we ask members from the private sectors to be part of the survey, and we are very pleased to listen also to them. So I don't want to spend time on this presentation. Let me only thank all the participants and the institutions that represent FAO, the European Commission, FACE, EIT, and the World Farmers Organizations for being with us today. And I'd like to say again, thanks to UFM, because we have started a very important journey, and I'm sure that together we will give a contribution for a more just and sustainable Mediterranean. Back to UFM, please, to you. Please.
Thank you, Chair. So now for the welcome, I would like to give the floor to Mr. Nasser Kamel, Secretary General of the Union for the Mediterranean. So Secretary General, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Giuseppe, and dear shares, my dear friend Angelo Ricarboni, and of course Dr. Mohammed Shinawi, and my neighbor in Barcelona, Director Octavi Quintana, and everyone participating today. Actually, it's quite impressive to see the number of attendees, as you mentioned, Angelo, and the number of countries they're coming from, which shows how important the subject is and how close to our interest at this very particular time. We have a habit, and I think it's relevant to always start by saying how much the world have changed in the last few months. And now, as we all are actually living in what we call the new normal, more and more people are joining in our different activities and exercise. With this new normal with us, we all know that in the last few months and in the foreseeable future, we will be all facing the double challenge, the health and the economic crisis, which has left institutions in emergency management mode. But it is also time, now that we've been through this for a few months, to start collecting our thoughts, our views, analyze the data when it comes to our area of activity, and try to chart a new way forward. This is, for me, I think, is a mandatory exercise if you want, as institution and as governments, to keep our action in line with our sustainable development goals. When I say ours, because it's the UN, at the global level, and of course at our regional Mediterranean level, in which PRIMA and UFM are centered to it, and centered to trying to chart a new course for our beloved region. This is why we immediately welcomed and accepted your kind proposal, the proposal of PRIMA, to organize a EUROMED roundtable on agri-food scenarios, which in my view is very timely indeed. My dear friends, COVID-19 and the implication of COVID-19 are becoming more clear. As I mentioned, regarding SDG, it is touching upon so many of those SDG. Health, of course, which is SDG 3, food, SDG 2, water, SDG 6, climate action, SDG 13, and many, many more if we look at it from a holistic, if we take a holistic approach looking at it. And I think it's time to observe the change of reality around us and learn from past lessons, but also prepare the way ahead to restart our economic development and to build and rebuild, but as we and everyone is saying, to rebuild better. For this, we need to use the sustainability paradigm as our polar star, I must say, when planning for a way forward on the goals we want to achieve, be it economic development, increasing inclusiveness on the water sector, and of course, climate and environmental actions. My dear friends, I believe the introduction of technological innovation will be key for agri-food business or businesses to survive and introduce technological, organizational, and social innovation into their production systems. It is clear that we need to exploit and support the existing nexus between innovation and the employability of our Mediterranean researchers. It is also a key topic where we at the UFM are currently increasing our action in partnership and with the participation of PRIMA. We are also very pleased with the role PRIMA is playing and the effort they are exerting towards the development of a UFM water agenda and their leading role in the water, energy, food ecosystem nexus in the Mediterranean. So I'm seizing this opportunity to thank you for your envisaged role in the Nexus program, that the UFM will start with its proof of concept with direct support of SIDA, of course, and GWP Med and the GIZ MENA office. At the same time, we appreciate also your strong engagement in the preparation of the Conference on Water, Energy, Food Ecosystems, Nexus Scientific Advances in the Mediterranean region, together with our colleague in the Cyprus Institute and the Joint Research Center to be held next year in Nicosia, hopefully physically and not virtually. This is the way of demonstrating the cooperation spirit, as you rightly mentioned, launched 25 years ago in the beautiful city of Barcelona, which charted a new chapter of peaceful cooperation for prosperity across our sea. I am a firm believer that PRIMA and UFM are the practical incarnation of this spirit. And their adaptation and continuous adaptation to challenges, reality, and opportunity are example of what needs to be done and will be done in adapting an evolution, a positive evolution of our efforts and of others in the next 25 years. In keeping with that spirit, thank you for being with us today. Thank you, my dear colleagues from PRIMA, and I'm sure your discussion today will be extremely enriching and we will be able to draw lots of lessons out of this very useful exercise. Once again, thank you very much, and I hope you have a very successful webinar, meeting, call it as you may. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary General. Now, as a logistical reminder, all the attendees, which I see very numerous, as was mentioned just before the start of this meeting, you can choose the interpretation if you wish to switch languages, as there is also French and Arabic being offered. Now let's move to the next part of this roundtable, where we will have the introduction to the survey, which is being performed by Mr. Omar Amawi, which is the Deputy Director of the PRIMA Foundation. So, Mr. Amawi, if you can hear us, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Yes, I can hear you. Hope you can hear me as well. Good afternoon to everybody. Thank you very much for the introductions. Thanks to PRIMA Chair and to the Secretary General of the UFM for their valuable comments and contribution to this webinar, actually. From my side, I will be presenting in brief the outcomes or the process of this survey activity. And if we go back like in time 2 months ago or 3 months ago, not to remind you of the tragic situation that we were all facing and the world was facing back then, where we were all surrounded by many doubts and many uncertainties about what was going on back then and still going, actually. So PRIMA, as many effective and serious organizations, has decided to contribute to the debate about this whole dilemma and the COVID-19 crisis, and took an action to launch a survey about the potential future scenarios of the EUROMED Agrifood system, since PRIMA is mainly focusing on this type of thematic areas. And the idea was to understand the emerging trends that will or that we will experience in the near future. We are not talking about a long period. We're talking about 12 to 18 months post to this crisis. So a table of few statements that were selected to represent the likely future agri-food scenarios was proposed. It was sent to participants from the Mediterranean area, and they were asked for their opinion, whether they agree or not agree, or to what extent in any case if they agree or disagree. These statements actually were divided into three main pillars: the agri-food systems and society, businesses, and consumers. In addition to these three pillars and the questions, each participant was also asked to write a short note on the most important issues that he or she may think in the food system scenario post the COVID-19 crisis. The initial deadline for this survey was May 19, and it was extended in order to gather more participations and responses. And finally, we were able to gather more than 180 responses from experts around the Mediterranean, and they were mainly from the academia and from the public institutions. Following to this, we have received the surveys, and we went through the analysis of the content of these survey, and we started to prepare the report end of June, actually. And I hope that you all had the chance to look at this report and to go through the content. And you may have noticed that it has been divided into two descriptive parts. We tried to just put the information as we have received it, considering that today we want to discuss it, and always feel free to agree or disagree or add, suggest new scenarios as you think necessary. The empirical part of this report, again, focusing or divided the analysis into three parts according to the pillars. And you may have noticed that there has been a variable range of agreement, between very high agreement and sometimes not, I will not say disagreement, but not as high agreement regarding to the questions. For example, we have received a high agreement on some questions in the agri-food system and society. For example, the innovative approaches will be needed to secure food supplies to vulnerable groups. And I think innovation has been mentioned both by the Secretary General of UFM and the chair of Prima Foundation, and has been always the name of the game. Innovation has always been that important. So probably this pandemic has really re-emphasized the importance of innovation towards any sector, actually, not only the agri-food. And again, we got 85% agreement, for example, for the e-commerce, that e-commerce will streamline value chains and digital sales will grow. That's in the business pillar. And we got 80% agreement also in the consumers pillar, where e-commerce and digital sales will grow, and the experts agreed strongly on these two questions. On the other hand, there were some kind of disagreements. For example, when we go to the major financial problems will affect big agri-food businesses, where 32% disagreed and 38% neither agreed or disagreed. This may leads us to a preliminary conclusion that maybe back then, when during the period where the survey was open, the picture was not really fully clear for everybody. Again, there were many doubts and many uncertainties going on, and really we needed more information to build our cases on and build a solid grounds for any argument for a potential future scenario in the agri-food system. Regarding the qualitative part, again, hope you had a chance to look at it. And also this part represents mainly the remarks or the notes, the comments provided by the experts. And you may have noticed that these opinions were representing a wide spectrum of thoughts and views, actually. For example, some experts have seen that the whole COVID-19 issue has been over-exaggerated, and we needed really more information, and that the agro-food system has always been resilient and has been always to manage going through tough periods and situations like this. While on the other hand, some other experts thought that we really need to focus on specific issues and rearrange our priorities. A third opinion went through that, okay, we need to adjust temporarily for a short period of time, but our priorities will remain our priorities. And once we manage to go through this pandemic, I think we should go back to our priorities and carry on as usual. The content of the report, actually, or this debate, can be useful as a starting point for our discussion today. So we need to keep in mind that while dealing with emergency, we should also investigate and prepare for the future. That's why this survey was prepared. The role of research innovation, as well as the key topics of PRIMA, or that PRIMA is focusing on, will probably be strengthened and valued through the outcomes of this survey and this debate today. Again, we have described what has been provided to us by a representative number of experts in the Mediterranean. So today we count very much on your contribution in order to enhance this report and to come up with solid conclusions that could really help us in PRIMA, and not in PRIMA, probably in other programs as well, in order to re-identify our priorities or probably enhance our activities in order to cope with the current situation, and not only this COVID-19 crisis, but what hopefully will not happen, but we need to be prepared for any kind of emergency in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Amawi, for this impressive snapshot, effectively, of expert views for our region, which is a key part if we want, as institution and stakeholder, to chart our course for the post-COVID scenario. Now, please allow me to leave the floor to our moderator for the upcoming debate with Mr. Octavio Quintana, the director of the PRIMA Foundation. So Octavio, if you can hear us, the floor is yours. Can you hear us?
Yes. Good afternoon to you all. It is a pleasure to be here with you all. And we have the privilege this evening to have 6 experts who will contribute to discuss these outcomes that have been presented by Omar, and they will also, they represent several important organizations. I will introduce them once every time that they speak. What I'd like to start with is first mentioning 3, or I think that the outcomes of the survey are quite clear, but the reality, in fact, showed us that the views of very many of these experts didn't match the reality. The reality is always surprising, and one only need to look back at this few months back. The first thing that drew my attention is that, in fact, the food supply chain has worked remarkably well everywhere. And I think that this was difficult to foresee, but this has been the reality. The second thing is that as opposite to the crisis of 2018 and 17 and 18. Countries did not limit exports, and we need to be aware that in the region, 4/5 of the food is import or exported. So of the calories that people eat are imported, so are not produced there where they are consumed. And the third thing that is remarkable as well of this crisis is that the food prices didn't escalate as it happened also in 2007 and 8. I think that those are three important points that the reality did not match what the experts foresaw when the survey was conducted. Now, and I like all the experts to say, if they may, few words about this. The second thing I'd like you to discuss very briefly is which priorities and policies the institutions you represent of these experts around well, not, I was going to say around the table, but they're not around the table, but each of them back in their places, whether there has been a response specific to the challenges raised by COVID-19. And the second thing I like them to reflect on is good practices, where they want to share good practices with us in their specific field. So without more introduction from my side, I'd like to start with the European Commission. We have the privilege to have Hans-Jörg Lutzdeyer with us, who is a Senior Policy Officer at DG Research of Innovation in the Bioeconomy and Food Systems. And please, Hans-Jörg, hello, good to see you again. And whether you could comment briefly on these issues I introduced. Thank you very much. The floor is yours.
Good evening, good evening, Quintana, and nice to see you back, a former colleague from the European Commission. Thank you also for inviting me to this distinguished panel. I think looking at the first question, I mean, we can say luckily, as you pointed out, the supply chains were largely functioning. But I think in the COVID crisis, there were also critical moments. It was the moment when shocks came up and borders were closed. But quickly it was understood that actually supply chains need to keep functioning. So food supply actually, after maybe 2 days of complete border closes, in some cases were reopened again, and it was only felt, let's say, in some fresh vegetable markets or so, that some supply was cut off. And I think we can say, fortunately, the international community has learned lessons from the 2008 food price crisis. So there was some preparedness. There was quickly also meetings between ministries of agriculture, facilitated also by FAO. So ministers from EU, from Africa met. The G20 market observatories were functioning. So there was, let's say, information on how the markets were working. And maybe there's also a bit a component of demand or of shift of dietary shift. I mean, we know the big role of animal feed in commodity supply, and in Europe, for example, red meat consumption is gradually declining, reducing a bit the demand for example, soy. But quite drastically in China, the African swine fever led to actually a reduced demand for soy. So there was also this situation that there was no peak demand at this period of time, and therefore there was sufficient supply of commodities in the markets, and we could avoid a supply, let's say, cut. Looking at the policies briefly, it was already mentioned in the European Commission. The Green Deal package was announced on the 11th of December. It was followed by the Farm to Form strategy on 20th of May. And it's quite ambitious. It sets out objectives for 2030, reduction of pesticide use, let's say going up to 25% of organic agriculture in Europe by 2030, a very big challenge if we look at the challenge of pesticides and reducing pesticides and coming to other integrated pest management solutions. So it needs a heavy research and innovation investment. We also have a policy, actually, of a very sound policy of EU-African Union collaboration. We have the high-level policy dialogue on research and innovation, with its first priority, food and nutrition security and sustainable agriculture. And just tomorrow, there will be a ministerial meeting of research ministers of Europe and Africa, taking also the COVID crisis as an opportunity for reinforced investment in research and innovation. First in the health sector, but it's clear that part of recovery is a functioning food system, and therefore research, there's a big call also for research and innovation in food. And concrete examples, we are looking to plan Horizon Europe 21 to 26. And part of it is what we call the Food 2030 food system approach. So we have identified roadmaps from agroecology, One Health approach in animal production, linking to human health. We have also reinforced rural and urban linkages, working with food cities, and also taking, let's say, a close link to FAO agendas in this way. It was mentioned that the digital revolution plays a big role, and we have invested in the past and are looking also in future actually to invest more in digital solutions, also taking advantage of Earth observation with Copernicus data. So I think there is an ambitious research and innovation agenda ahead of us, and scaling up those examples which are coming from our projects and projects of Prima. And certainly if we talk about African Union, then the northern part of Africa, south of the Mediterranean is clearly part of it, and therefore we are happy actually that we have close linkages in this initiative, particularly to Egypt, Tunisia, Algeria, just to give a few examples. Thank you. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Hans-Jörg. Really, all the initiatives that you mentioned would deserve by itself a webinar or a couple of them. So impossible to discuss them in depth, but thank you very much, because I think that you offer already a very good panoply of actions that you have ahead of you. The next speaker is Jamie Morrison from FAO. He's a strategic program leader for food systems program at this organization. He has a long experience. I will not go into the details of your CV. Please, the floor is yours, because the time is very short. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Quintana, and good afternoon to everybody. In much the same way as Mr. Lutzeger was commenting on the global sort of food price situation, at FAO we've identified 3 key phases in relation to analysing the impact of the pandemic. The first relates to the containment measures, where, as he was saying, there were fears that some countries would implement trade restrictions to ensure that sufficient food was available to their own consumers at an affordable price. In the event, and in large part due to the provisions of data through systems such as the Agricultural Market Information System, this didn't happen. In fact, only 7% of global trade was affected by trade restrictions which were put in place fairly soon after containment measures were put in place. And that compares with 30% of global trade which was affected in 2008. That said, one of the remaining concerns that we have relates to international shipping. We're now reaching a stage where some crews have been at sea for almost 11 months, which is the limit as to what they're allowed to be on boats for health and safety. And there are still some countries in parts of the world which have heavily restricting the ability of crews to change, to swap crews. And we fear that this could create bottlenecks, for example, reducing freight capacity. So this is something to keep an eye on and to work with countries to ensure that crews are able to change in this critical point. What we've seen, I think, also is that where disruptions are occurring, they are disproportionately affecting the availability and accessibility of high-value, labour-intensive, perishable commodities, such as fruit and vegetables, meat and fish, milk and dairy, which in turn are essential for healthy diets and good nutrition. We've seen localized outbreaks associated with milk packing plants, with the harvesting of labor-intensive horticultural products, which do in themselves cause bottlenecks within certain food value chains. We've also seen the dumping of milk, the loss of unharvested vegetables, where markets have been disrupted. But these have tended to be relatively short-term phenomena in the region. The second phase which we look at is the consequences. And this is really what's starting to kick in now, the consequences of what will be a significant economic recession with significant job losses. We estimate that up to a third of those employed in the agriculture and food sector globally could be affected in terms of losing their job or losing part of the income through those jobs. That's a significant number. And this will come about because of reduced demand, especially coming through food service sectors, through high value export markets, as demand dries up, as incomes fall, but also the difficulties for agro industries to retain their employees in the face of the inevitable cash flow challenges that they will face. We need to keep these enterprises running if we're to keep food systems running. So this again is a critical area that we need to keep a close eye on and facilitate the functioning of these small, medium, large agro enterprises. A third phase looking forward, clearly it's imperative to ensure that we can deliver affordable, safe, nutritious food to vulnerable consumers. But we need to do that in a way that protects the health and well-being of those workers involved in food systems. And this is the phase where we really need to work on this food health development triology, ensuring we put in place adjustments to our food systems which allow workers to work safely to deliver the food we want. And as the virus spreads, this is going to become a more and more significant issue. So I think this one to keep aware of. Just touching briefly on your second question about the priorities of FAO. Although we see the disruptions in food systems, we also see disruptions create opportunities to drive forward the transformation towards more sustainable food systems. We've seen how quickly some parts of the food system have been able to respond, and also importantly, the capacity of different food system actors to work together in ways that we haven't seen before. So the crisis can serve as a turning point to rebalance food systems, to build back better. And at FAO, we've identified this as a priority for our work on food systems as we support the process towards the UN Food Systems Summit later next year. Yesterday, FAO launched its joint action on COVID-19, a program which has 6 priority areas in addition to its humanitarian response. These areas are trade and food safety, poverty reduction, economic inclusion, preventing pandemics of animal origin through a One Health approach, equipping smallholders for post-COVID recovery and resilience building, data, information and analysis, and 6th, food system transformation. And within that 6th, we're looking at issues such as promoting innovations for more efficient food supply chains, ensuring food safety, reducing loss and waste, as I said before, sustaining agri-business enterprises. And just finally, turning to a concrete example of how we're trying to bring this work together in support of transformation to more sustainable food systems in the EUROMED agri-food sector. And this is the Sustainable Food Systems Mediterranean Platform. Here, FAO is joining forces with SIAM and the Union for the Mediterranean, as well as a number of other partners, to establish a multi-partner, multi-stakeholder platform which brings together policymakers, scientists, and other key players across the food system. The idea is to try to move collectively towards solutions that work for sustainable food systems, that deliver healthier diets and offer new economic and social opportunities within the Mediterranean region. And what we hope is that the Mediterranean platform will support the development of a series of flagship projects. And these, working together across actors, will facilitate resource mobilization with key actors, key partners, IFIs, for example, to really scale up action which is needed for positive transformation of the way in which food is produced, processed, distributed, and consumed across the Mediterranean region. And we see the platform and the flagships within it as constituting a key input towards the Food Systems Summit, which in itself provides a timely opportunity to forge better interconnected actions and commitments which are really needed to transform our food systems. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jamie. I think that this comprehensive view and being very especially interested by these 3, the way you focus the first question on these 3 items, that I think will be very useful because they encompass several points of view. Thank you very much, and thank you very much to FAO specifically. And let's turn to the next speaker. She's Marta Rivera. Marta Rivera, she's the chair on agroecology and food systems and director at the University of Vic in Catalonia, Spain. And she's also member of the Scientific Advisory Board of JPI, Joint Program Initiative FACE, which stands for Agriculture, Food and Climate Change. So Marta, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Xavi. Thanks also in the name of FACE for the invitation. So just to answer some of the questions that you have already put on the table. Regarding the previous crisis, I think it's important here to understand that the origin of the crises are not the same. So the fact that they are different type of crises also implies that there has been normally different type of results and responses, no? So we need to remember that the 2007 and 2008 crisis was more a price crisis. It was a multifactorial crisis where issues like climate change, particularly the drought in Russia and the shortage of the rice in the global market, but also speculation in the global market was very relevant by that time, as well as other issues like biofuel. So it was kind of multifactorial crisis, which also resulted in different responses by different countries. Some countries already closed their frontiers, others responded by buying a lot of products in the global market to be able to guarantee the food security in their populations and so on. So I think it's normal that the response is different because the source of the crisis and the factors that really bring us to a crisis are different. So one was a price crisis, and here we have a different kind of crisis, which particularly in the case of food systems are derived from, first, the fact that some workers are ill and they cannot go to work in the food systems, in the food industry, processing and so on, but also because of the policies that have been implemented, the lockdown and so on, that also have impact, of course, on food systems. So I think that's basically one of the reasons why the response has been different, and basically because the causes are different. One of the issues that you are raising, which is also about the prices, it's true when we look at the FAO price index, food price index, the FPI, there has been no changes, and actually for some products we have witnessed there has been some reduction in prices, no? But I think here we need to be careful. I think at some point there are local variations, as well as it depends on the product. So in Spain, we know that for some fresh products, there have been some price increases, particularly not at the farm, not on farm, not farm gate, but basically at the consumer side. There is still very early to know whether the fact that supermarket was particularly mainly the single option for urban consumers to eat food, and supermarkets have exerted or not some power in the price. This is early to know. We don't have the data, but we know that for some products there have not been changes on farm gate, but there have been changes at the consumer side, particularly from some fresh vegetables. This we know for Spain, where I live. We still have no data for all countries, but I think here we also have to avoid general or more universal conclusions, because definitely there is a sectorial difference as well as particularly some country difference. Here we have no data, but we need to look at this very carefully. Regarding, you were mentioning about our institutions. In FACSE, we are now 10 years. FACSE was launched in 2010, the Joint Program Initiative. And particularly now we are in the moment in which we are revising the strategic research agenda. Our new vision is actually very much in line with the need to look at the system shocks. So the new mission that we have in FACSE, it's aligning and co-designing research and delivering knowledge for addressing the challenges of sustainable and resilient agricultural production systems, integrating climate, food, and ecosystems. So one of the major changes that we have already had in FACSE has to do with the need to look at the food as a systems. So it's not only to look at production, although our main focus is production, but really to understand which are the interaction of production with all the rest components of the food system. And here with the main focus on food security and resilience. So clearly the pandemics and the COVID-19 crisis is a clear example of things that we need to look for, that we need to look at. Sorry, not need to look for, need to look at. One of the things we are trying, because we have set up a group to look at the COVID within the FACSE, and one of the lessons that we already have learned from FACSE, from COVID, sorry, refers to the fact that, of course, crises are systemic, and that food is an essential sector. In the lockdown, only essential activities were allowed, and food was one of them, farming and distributing food, of course, to ensure the food security of all population, but also the fact that crisis highlights system vulnerability. That crisis also amplify the inequalities, existing inequalities. And this we have witnesses, we have seen this during the COVID crisis, and we will continue seeing this in the future, because as Jamie was saying, definitely this socioeconomic crisis derived from COVID will have enormous impact in the future, particularly on more vulnerable groups. And in our case, also, we need to look at the food security impact on this. No? Also, the SOFI that the SOFI 2020 that was released also by FAO also was paying attention and also warning about the increase in the number of people that will be hungered to COVID, with some, of course, a range of numbers, because scenario now is very high, very uncertain, but certainly there will be an increase in the numbers of hungry people. Another thing that we have already gathered in our group of FACSE is that an excess of specialization makes the system more vulnerable, while the diversification helps to spread the risk. So that's some things that we need to look at when we need to write lessons learned from this crisis, from COVID. So the need to diversify helps, diversification helps to spread the risks. Issues like digitalization, solidarity, cooperation, information exchange, these are things that have already helped to increase resilience in the context of COVID. And also something that we have been looking at, and is also linked to what the first presenter was mentioning, that the short-term shocks normally or can't contribute that we deviate from our long-term goals. And I think that's important. We believe that it's important. We do not deviate from our long-term goals. This doesn't mean that we need to introduce the lessons learned, as we are suggesting, and particularly in FACSE, what we are doing is now in our strategic research agenda, where we have 4 core themes, integrating in our core themes issues like the need to incorporate risk and vulnerability in the assessment. So we have one core theme, which is sustainable and resilient farming, which will be central in addressing shocks and looking at the interactions. But we will ask all the researchers to look and incorporate risk and vulnerability assessment in all core themes. And we also would like to integrate tools to support risk management policies. Issues like monitoring, early warning system, and so on. We want to reinforce this, as well as, of course, trade-offs that may occur when we have to introduce risk management in our policies and, of course, in our research agenda. So these are the kind of things that we are introducing in FACSE now as part of the need to look at the lessons learned from COVID. Other things, particularly we want to, of course, we are working on a workshop about how to embody the risk into the bioeconomy research, and we want to promote a call for a DESEC study on the vulnerability of European food systems, because as an European joint program initiative, we have a clear focus on Europe, and we need to really understand which is the vulnerability of our food system. As part of the, and with this I finish, as part from good practice in my field, here I will speak from my own experience, not as FACSE, but actually we have already performed a diagnosis, a research here in Catalonia, looking at how the agroecological sector has responded, how it wasn't impacted by COVID, but how it has also responded to COVID. And definitely one of the lessons learned was that cooperation has already increased very much. The reliance of many consumers on local food chain, the increase in the number of consumers that were relying on this agroecological food chain has increased enormously during the e-commerce. Here, digitalization, e-commerce, of course, has already contributed and helped this type of food chain a lot. And then in the issue of policy, I would like to remark probably one case of, let's call it good example of policy versus a not so good example. Here in Catalonia, the government already put money on the table to buy food from all the farmers who were relying on the Horeca channel. That was, of course, closed because of COVID. So those, they put money to buy directly for them the food that could not introduce into the market, and of course there was a collapse here in the demand. So to buy them the food from them towards and to provide with this food to the food banks, right? So because there was an increase in the consumer side of people with that needed a help, and the food poverty increased, and there was people really relying on food banks. So this money was already directly to farmers in order to provide the food banks. One bad policy, in my opinion, was in another autonomous community in Spain, where the regional government put the money to fast food chains to feed the school children, to pizzas and so on. So the children were eating every day junk food, which from a food system approach and from a food and nutrition security, we know is definitely not the best option for children, and particularly for vulnerable children. So this is also an example to show how really regional and local food policies can do a lot, and they really have still margins. There is not everything at the national, not everything at the European Commission level. There is also margin at the local and regional policies, and the need to really gather which are good and bad examples of policies in order to help policymakers to really make the best of and learn from this crisis. With this, I think I have more or less responded your question, I hope, Xavi, and I pass the floor.
Thank you very much, Marta. Thank you for, you said many things, but I think I'll retain a couple of them. That the COVID crisis exacerbated the inequalities, the vulnerability of very many parts of the population, and that the only way to tackle this, and I now take the words of Angelo at the very beginning, is cooperation, cooperation, cooperation. Thank you very much. And let's move now to Professor Ayman Abu Hadid. He is full professor at Ain Shams University. He has a very long CV, of which I only signal that he has been for 4 times Minister of Agriculture in Egypt. So please, the floor is yours. Professor Ayman Abu Hadid. We cannot hear you. You have muted.
I think now you can hear.
Oh, now it works. Good, thank you.
What? Okay. Thank you very much for the invitation. And I'm honored to be with this group of experts to address this important issue. And I will concentrate on, in my talk, about the situation in South Mediterranean and especially in Egypt. I would like to, first of all, indicate that the pandemic of COVID-19 is vast spreading and very infectious, and especially in densely populated area in rural areas where most of the food production is taking place. There is warnings from different organizations that this pandemic will increase the poverty for tens of millions, and especially in rural area, which is responsible for food production. The COVID-19 and the consequences of the event resulted in a lot of imbalances in the chain of food production. For example, the movement of workers from one region to another, the movement of transportation of inputs and outputs were also disturbed. The small farms and the small enterprises that deal with the post-harvest of the production have also been severely affected due to the lack of regular workers and also the input and output mobility. Some countries also restricted the exportation of foodstuff to the normal markets, and this resulted in a severe shortage in some countries, especially in South Mediterranean, where, for example, Egypt, we are depending on 50% of wheat from international markets, and this has been affected and questioned about the continuity of availability of this kind of thing. There is also some effects on the supermarkets and the restaurants, where the activities, the social activities have been restricted a lot, and therefore the income of these places were reduced, and resulted in a reduction in the demand on agricultural and food commodities, which in turn decreased the price and participated more in the low income of the farmer, and and also the packing and manufacture of the agricultural commodities. The reduction in income and the reduction in the farm price resulted in increasing the problem of poverty for a large sector of growers in South Mediterranean in general, and especially in Egypt. Therefore, there should be a very one of the most important priorities for the future is to increase to improve the agricultural systems and to increase the resilience of agricultural production to confront such crisis. In fact, crises are not happening only once and end. It is there is always a possibility of repeating the same crisis or similar crises throughout several years, and it is increasing and happening unexpectedly. And therefore, we have to absorb this lesson and to work on improving the ability of each society to confront the crisis. For example, the climate change issue has affected agricultural production and affected the food production system severely, and it is expected to continue affecting it in the future. And I think that the same mechanism that we are thinking of confronting the climate change issue can help in confronting the issue of the COVID pandemic. We have to increase the ability of the agricultural system to confront the crisis whenever it happens. It is also important to have a social safety network that can help the small farmers and the small industries related to food production whenever a crisis happens and affect their existence in the market. Also, it is important to look at the cooperative systems in agricultural production and how to improve it in a way that can allow the sustainability of agricultural production and can allow and make sure about the making available the inputs of agriculture to the farm, and also of marketing the yields of agriculture to the end user. Also, it is important to try to make available the food stuff locally, and using the existing water and land resources. And this is one of the things that the academia and the technical education have to focus on, how to improve the agricultural systems to improve the productivity using the marginal resources. One important issue also is the ability to store the agricultural production. For example, storing the grains is very important, to have enough stores, efficient stores that can make sure that the a good reservoir of grains are available. And the same thing with the pulses, and also it's important to look at improving the industrialization or value adding to the agricultural products. Instead of exporting vegetables or fruits, we have to look at the possibility of adding value to it, and not to export the raw material, but to export value added material, so that there is a possibility of earning more money that allow the countries to import what they are not able to produce. Several commodities has to be available, and has to have enough amounts stored in each country, so that when a crisis like this happens, at least there is something that can make life going. One important thing is the
we cannot hear you.
Legislation. Is there a problem with the voice? Is there a problem again with the voice?
Professor Abu-Adid?
Yes?
We cannot hear you. By the way, we are running out of time.
Okay.
No, we cannot hear you.
Okay. I think I've concluded.
Okay, well, could you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yes, good. We cannot hear you, but in any case, thank you very much. I take from what you said, and I think it's very important, that you pointed out the importance of that this crisis has done to the producers, increasing the poverty of producers. And I think that this is a major issue. So not so much, it has affected not so much consumers, but producers. And I think that underlying this issue is very relevant. Let me move, thank you very much. And let me move to the next speaker, Ariana Giulio Dori, who is the Secretary General of World Farmers Organization. I think that her point of view is very important, because that links with what Professor Abu-Adid was saying about increasing the poverty of the producers. So please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you also for inviting us.
We cannot hear you.
Can you hear me? Yeah. So apparently People can hear me? Okay, thank you, thank you. So thank you for the opportunity of joining this very interesting webinar. The World Farmers Organization is a global farmers association. Our members are national farmers union that are sitting.
Sorry, sorry, Ariana, we cannot hear you.
But people apparently can. Yeah.
Now, yes. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. So I was saying that our members are sitting actually on all sides of the Mediterranean Sea, so Europe, Africa, Asia, and so I'm particularly pleased to be able to bring their voice here into the debate. So first of all, to your initial question, whether actually the food system had delivered, if the value chain had delivered properly during the COVID crisis, well, you're probably right. And the take of the farmers on this is that it's probably due to a good balance between keeping the international trade flow open and investing in local food systems and local food production. This is particularly true also within the Mediterranean region, where a huge variety of different food options are available that make also the Mediterranean diet partner so unique. But unfortunately, this is not what the farmers have experienced in terms of difficulties. So if we can say that from a general perspective, the system has functioned, farmers have been experiencing a lot of troubles. Disruptions in access to inputs, disruptions in access to market have hindered the capacity of the farmers of earn their life in a good way during the COVID pandemic. What I would like to highlight is also that farmers are particularly scared by the opportunity of a second wave crisis. And even if we might be scared by the pandemic itself, actually what scares the farmers most is the ghost of poverty and the ghost of hunger. Yesterday, FAO has published the SOFI, so the state of food insecurity in the world, and we know that we might expect more than 130 million new people going hungry due to COVID. And you know, the paradox is that most of those people are considered farmers, so food producers who are going hungry. That's a paradox that our food systems must take into account. So the fear of the farmers is that they might encounter troubles in the next season, actually, because many of our farmers have committed to the banks, to financial institutions. The COVID crisis found them already in the middle of the production or even in the harvesting season. But what about next season if the farmers are not able to plant, if the farmers are not able to produce? So it's urgent to support the farmers, even financially, to bridge this gap and to ensure that food production can continue. Stimulus packages have been promoted by many governments, but not all of them are suitable to the needs of the farmers. By the way, I do not want to focus on the troubles and on the worries only. I think that COVID-19 is also forcing us to see the opportunities that lay behind the threat. And the opportunity that we see at COVID times is this: never before we had food so high in the public debate. Everybody is now caring, everybody is now concerned about food production. And that's a very interesting point. And we must seize this opportunity to work on the food systems that we want for the future. So I'm really pleased to hear, for instance, from Jamie Morrison, that there's also will to work on a sustainable food systems Mediterranean platform, because this can be a very interesting opportunity to test how we can work together. But from the WFO, so the World Farmers Organization perspective, we have been already adopting a statement, a policy that is common to all the farmers of the globe about how we want to work on food systems and what we want from the food systems. And these include a quick recovery from COVID-19, but also something that we must take into account, that is finally breaking silos and getting all the actors working together, putting the farmers at the very heart of food systems, and especially family farmers that anchor not only the rural areas, but all the communities, and ensure that food can be on our table. So in this process, innovation is key, and it's so vital for the farmers that the World Farmers decided to create even a scientific council that is driven by this need for science-led, science-based practices that can improve the quality of food systems under all the perspectives. So sustainability for sure, from the healthy planet approach, healthy people, but let's never forget that we need also a lively agricultural sector and farmers that are able to have a decent life in order to ensure that we can provide food to a growing population. As far as our own commitment during COVID times, I'm glad to tell you that you can see from my virtual background, we have been immediately focusing on promoting the role of farmers worldwide. And I must say that the consideration, the reputation of the farmers have never been so high in many of the countries where our members are from. But that's not enough for sure. We have also launched an agri information hub on COVID-19, where all the farmers of the globe can find, I would like to say, unfiltered information. So information coming directly from the farmers about the impact of COVID, what they're experiencing, what are the challenges, what are the initiatives that farmers organizations are putting in place to support their members, what are the governments doing. We have also published a technical assessment that is available on our website that provides an overview of the impact of COVID so far in the different regions of the world. I also like to highlight that this was a huge opportunity for us to get to know incredible innovative practices that are proven that farmers are committed to drive the transformation towards more sustainable food systems. So first, I would like to highlight what also the representative of FACE JPI has said. So we assisted to a push towards the digital transformation with farmers both in developing and developed countries, switching towards the digital sales channels and direct sales channels, and that's a huge result considering the rate of adoption of digital transformation so far in the agricultural community. I also would like to underline another important element, that is the solidarity dimension. Farmers, more than many other players in the society, more than any other actors, have been acting to ensure that the ghost of hunger is not haunting the communities. In particular, farmers faced an incredible tough period where they had surpluses remaining on the field due to the disruption in the value chain, and many organizations decided to use the surpluses to bring that food to the most vulnerable communities. We saw that, for instance, in the Mediterranean region. We have experience from our members, from instance, in Italy, with an initiative that is called Suspended Groceries, where both farmers and consumers can decide to bring food to the people that are most in need. We saw it also in other countries like South Africa, for instance, where it was impossible to bring food to the formal value chains, and farmers delivered directly to consumers. So The farmers-driven contribution to sustainable food systems is already shaping a building back better approach. There's much more to do, and we try to focus on the peer-to-peer exchange and the farmers-driven contribution to ensure that any decision that affects the farmers is taken into account their needs and expectation. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I take from your interesting presentation a couple of things. First of all, these opportunities that farmers and I think that producers, food producers, have been at the top of the debates, of the public debates during this crisis. Also, their solidarity. And finally, you are worried about the second wave. Let me tell you that we're still in the first wave, and the first wave, unfortunately, is not over. So I think that your worries are shared by all of us. Thank you very much. And let me turn to the last speaker, Andy Zinga, who is the CEO of European Institute of Technology Food, IIT. He probably is the only one participating today really from the private sector, and I think that your point of view is very, I mean, we are looking forward to hear your views. Andy, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Octavi. I would like to start by just changing a misperception. So yes, we are organized in the form of a private company, but we are a non-profit organization that is funded by the European Union. So what we do is we've been founded by a consortium of partners that includes what we call the knowledge triangle, which means there's industry, there's universities and academia, there's research organizations, and there's startups, and all of those together do projects that help to transform the agri-food sector. So we do about 100 projects a year, spend about 60 million euros to make that happen. So we've been around for 3 years, and like I say, every year we invest major energies and monies into transforming the food system. So again, we are a nonprofit funded by European Union taxpayer money. I just wanted to make sure that that's clear. So secondly, about the questions. First of all, about what happened to the prices back in 07, 08. I think that we kind of dodged a bullet this time. When we look back at 07 and 08, as Marta was saying earlier, there was a kind of a speculation situation, right? So the biofuels, there was a high demand for biofuels, both in the US and in the European Union, which led to a reduction of course grains. And since the whole financial market collapsed, speculation was rampant. So people saw that that everything was going down, so they said, let's go in there. Add to this the export bans and the land use and such like. There you have 70 to 75% of all of that. Secondly, the food system has been very resilient, you know, and there are a few factors for this, right? So one of them is that the European Union has shown some wisdom and learnings, right? So the Commission has done some really good things, you know. For example, made sure that the workers in the food industry are deemed as essential. So because as you may remember, there were a lot of manufacturing operations where the edict was you shouldn't go to work because it's too dangerous for you. The food sector, food and drink, was deemed to be essential, so people could go to work. Secondly, green lanes. So the borders were shut down, but eventually the green lanes were opened and the traffic could flow more. So that's another thing. And I think also that to some degree, many of the food companies that are part of our network, so we have organizations like PepsiCo, Nestle, Danone, DSM, and others are part of our network of partners. They said that the demand in the hospitality industry has really sagged, of course, during this time. So they were able to shift more resources into end users and such like. So there has been a kind of demand, and that kind of kept the prices in check as well. So that's the first thing I wanted to say about that. Secondly, the question was about priorities. And one of the things that this situation taught us at EIT Food, is that first of all, a systemic approach is needed. So it's not like we can come up with a ton of really great point solutions that will then solve the crisis. No, what is needed is somehow to look at the whole network of pieces. So if you have one worker missing in a production, one or two workers missing in a production site, that may have an impact on the retail situation at some point, almost like a butterfly effect. So you have to look at how everything hangs together. Secondly, and I think this is important, we realize that we have to amp up our speed. So, you know, you can't just sit and say, every year we do this and that, you know, so we believe that we need to build on what's there already, which is why we're reaching out to organizations like Prima, working with Angelo, and we also work with the FAO and others. We believe that it's important to build on what's been done already. The European Union, just as an example, has already spent millions on things like obesity. So there are findings that we can take and will take and build on those to scale those across the whole European Union. We do not have to reinvent the wheel here. None of us need to. I think that's an important insight that we gained here. So to say we build on what exists already, and secondly, to build much more on digitalization. So the digitalization of the agri-food sector is still underdeveloped. Smart agriculture is one piece, and I really loved Ariana's passion. I think passion is the key to making anything happen, and it is true. So smart agriculture is one, but then there are other things like how companies are currently developing new products and services in agri-food is very much a trial and error process. So if things like an electronic nose could be developed further, where companies could simulate on the screen what a product would actually taste like without having to go and test it all the time, that would be another thing. So there are certain frontiers that we've discovered that help to accelerate the speed, building on what has been done already. So we're great believers in the open innovation principle of making something like that happen. So I think with that, I don't want to take up too much more time. There are many other things, concrete examples of things that we've done. So if you're interested, please just reach out to me. But I would say that's it for now. I don't want to monopolize this discussion, but it's really good to see these inspired insights from everybody and all this passion. So thanks for this, and that's it for now.
Thank you very much, Andy, and thank you for making the precision what EIT is about. I take from your speech three things that for me are very relevant and will really be helpful for our next work programs. The systemic approach, the speed based on what already exists, and digitalization. I think that the three concepts are essential to go or to set priorities in the future. Thank you very much to all the speakers. In fact, each of your speech could have been leading to a whole webinar or a couple of them for each of them. I'm very sorry to did not allow you to speak further, but time is very short, and unfortunately we cannot get any question because we are really behind schedule. So I'll pass over. I finish here thanking you very much to all the 6 speakers, and I'll pass the floor to Isidro Gonzalez from the Union for the Mediterranean. Isidro and Mohamed El Shinawi will set the conclusions of this webinar. Thank you very much. Isidro, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Octavi. Thank you well, to all the participants, and congratulations for this very fruitful discussion on the agri-food. So it has been really, really interesting. Well, I will not add much to what has been said. The Secretary General also expressed our position at the beginning. We at the UFM, especially in the water section, we are recognizing that the water, food, energy, and ecosystems are essential for human being, poverty reduction, sustainable development, and also they are part of the struggle against climate change. We are working as if considering that they are linked. There is an interlink between a nexus of natural, institutional, economic, and social frameworks. You know, water is used for agricultural production, and it's a keystone for the entire agro-food supply chain, which has been so strategic, so essential. We have seen it recently. We still see it during the times of the pandemic. You know that agriculture accounts for 70% of the global fresh water withdrawal. We require energy. We need energy for the production, for the transfer, and for the distribution of food. 30% of the total global energy is used for the food sector. A lot of water is being used, much more of the general public things, in the production of food. Water is used to produce energy, and energy is required to extract, pump, lift, collect, transport, and treat water. That's why we are very keen to build a cooperation with all actors, primarily in this case with Prima and others, to create synergies and maximize our benefits. We at the Union for the Mediterranean realize that healthy ecosystems support the sustainability of all what have been said, and negatively affected if water, energy, or food are used in an unsustainable way. Demands for water, food, and energy are increasing due to population growth and economic development. You know that the figures, the prospect for 2050, in 30 years' time, are alarming. It is expected that we will have a 50% increase in the demand of water, a 60% increase in the demand of food, and an 80% increase in the demand of energy. And also not going as far as 2050. If we just go to 2030, the world is projected to face an increase already of 40% of water demand. So this is alarming, and we need to be ready for that, especially in an area like the Mediterranean, where, as you know, we represent the 7% of the global population, but we only account for the 3% of the water resources of the whole planet. There is a big deficit to begin with. We are the Union for the Mediterranean. I finish with this, and I take advantage that Jamie Morrison has been also one of the speakers. We are working now on a platform of Mediterranean food system with FAO, and also with CIHEM. The three organizations are about to sign an MOU that will be, and we're expecting to launch this Mediterranean food system before the end of the year. Hopefully coinciding with the celebration of the 25th anniversary of the Barcelona process in November this year. And we count on Prima as a strategic partner for this initiative, which is a way of being pragmatic, of implementing already actions that can change the scenario and can help us to raise awareness on food sustainability and the need for sustainability in production and consumption of food. So thank you for giving me passing me the floor, and I pass the floor now back to Mohamed Eshinawi. Now I think it's for him to finish. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and it was really very important. And I would like to thank my dear friend Professor Angelo Riccaboni and my very dear friend Ambassador Nasser Kamel for this important webinar, and I would like also to thank all our panelists for their very important contribution in this webinar. I was going to give a conclusion, but I prefer that I will give a conclusion for all what our dear friends and panelists have said. So let me conclude by telling you that all our panelists and chairs had concluded that partnership is crucial. We are facing a lot of challenges that that we have to face by innovation and partnership and governance. Nobody must not be left behind. Private sector is crucial to work with. We are facing a lot of challenges, mainly in this era. We are facing health and economic crisis. We have to concentrate on our sustainable development goals globally and in our region. Technological innovation is crucial for agriculture. Nexus of employability and innovation is also crucial. From the survey that we have from the PRIMA, we still need more information for the future scenarios. E-commerce must play a crucial role in this. Again, innovation solutions are the bane of the game. Do we need to arrange our priorities or go ahead? There were a lot of debates reports. However, we see that strategies are on action. The partnership between the European Union and Africa is crucial, and we see a lot of initiatives like the Green Initiative, the One Health, and these initiatives we have to build on. Although only 7% of total trade were affected, but still, small enterprise and farmers were much more affected, and we have to concentrate in this. We have to be sure about the delivery of safe food and healthy and safe food with adjustment of our way of delivery in a healthy way. We have small holders. Data is crucial. The platform of multi-stakeholders has to be established, and we in PRIMA are supporting this multi-stakeholder platform. There were a lot of different responses in the global market, although there were not big changes in prices. However, there were some of the system vulnerability, and we cannot deviate from our long goals. Building on the technical education is crucial, and using the local resources. We have to concentrate on the ability of storage of grains, and enough and efficient stores is crucial. Value-added material also, for some countries, they have to work on that. All actors has to work together through a scientific council to improve the quality of food system and decent life for our farmers. Systemic approach and building on what's already there, and digitalization is still underdeveloped and has to be more in our agri-food system. On the technical part, there were some remarks about the organic products that received a very high demand during the COVID-19 period due to the belief of it contributes to better health. Innovative supply chain and alternative guarantee systems for quality of foods. Natural preservative for fruits and vegetables based on Mediterranean ingredients to ensure safety of foods during transportation. Indoor farming technologies and innovative business models to market linkage. Social insurance model for small process farmers, producers. Smart agriculture and digitalization of the agriculture. And there were some keywords that I would like to end with, which are innovative design research challenges that meet our demands. Again, the word innovative solution, innovative technology, social innovation. We have to work on our policies. We have to see what are the gaps, transformative resilience, and artificial intelligence. Thank you so much.
I think that this concludes our roundtable. So I would like to thank, first of all of our very high-level speakers, and all of our participants. A special thanks also especially to Octavi for moderating this very rich and interesting debate. As a final point, outcomes and recording of this meeting will be made available to all the participants.